start from the seed part.
Okay. So when I first opened, I realized my main job was to plant seeds for the future. And it even came to me, you're planting seeds for your own future. You'll be able to teach at a better level in the future because these seeds need to be planted first. And even people like Marianne Williams said, Patricia, you were the first. And that's because I planted seeds and gave the ideas, gave the verbal knowledge, but along with the verbal understanding, I sent, I guess there's no other way to say it, but I sent it telepathically, the realization of what it felt like. So when you really are with a good teacher, they teach you best, not by just telling you ideas you should know, but by radiating an experience you feel. Then your whole body takes it on. And, it's, so that's the important thing, that we have to be, we have to radiate, not just get good ideas. And so I started doing that, and I only worked word of mouth. I mean, my first workshop was I was at a big dinner with some people, and they were asking me questions because I had all these awarenesses, and I was kind of radiant. I just carried it within me. It took a lot of work to get there, but there it was. And I remember this one guy who was a Rolfer, I believe, and he said, I feel so rude. I didn't eat anything. I mean, I wouldn't eat. I would just be answering questions, and people would ask this, and like they couldn't help themselves. So he said, I feel so rude, Why don't you give a workshop? Let me pay you, and then I don't feel guilty, and you can eat your dinner. So I said, well, that's a good idea. I think I'll try that, So he paid in advance for 6 workshops, for 6 sessions, for he and his wife. And an interesting synchronicity to the universe, the way things work. I also happened to be at that time in a lot of money problems. My refrigerator broke, the dishwasher broke, and there was a pipe broken. And I didn't have enough money to fix everything. The check he gave me for the advance of everything paid for what I needed almost exactly. And I thought, I think there's a lesson about money here too. Because I always felt a little bit like money was, you do things out of love, and goodness. You can't do it for money. Because I was doing counseling at the Berkeley Mental Health Clinic, so they charged $35 an hour for my services. So I thought, well, that's a reasonable price. I'll charge $35. And so that's what I started. But I actually started less, and my intuition told me, you can't go too much less or you're defeating the purpose here. You have to, the lowest you can ever go is $15. So I started doing workshops at $15. And I went up to 35, and it took me 20 years to get up to 35. Because I had this thing against money, and I wanted to just be of service. This is not what I was going to say. So we're going to plant seeds, and the planting the seeds was the most important thing that I did. And what it felt like to me and what I saw happening was I had knowledge that I had earned through trying to figure out things that hurt me and that I saw in the world, and meditating and working on it and looking at it again and again and trying to figure it out, and all the counseling that I did. And while doing all this, my intuition was very strong, so images would come to me. Like in counseling, I remember this one lady was telling me a story about what was her problem. And I remember I suddenly felt like a different feeling. And I saw in my mind, almost like a dream, I was visualizing other things happening to her. And I said, I'm sorry, I stopped listening because I feel this other vision. Can I just tell you what I was getting? And I told her, and she burst into tears. And what I was picking up was the trauma, the scene of the trauma that caused the defenses that was causing the problem that she had. So it's like we bypassed all this counseling, talking stuff, and went right to what it was. And by saying it almost innocently and with concern and love, because I was trying to figure it out, and I knew it was important, but I didn't know what it was, she felt it. She felt that I saw it. She felt that I sensed it. And she felt what the antidote was. And it healed her. So I was getting a reputation of being able to heal people like in 2 sessions, because I didn't want to go through the rigmarole of everything. And I knew I could just feel what it was. So that's what started to happen when I did workshops. I would read the audience, and there'd be pockets of problems. And the different problems usually were fear-based, but they had a little matrix of issue. And I would start giving seeds to solutions. I would give little stories or say phrases. But I even said in the beginning of almost every workshop, besides that we were in the midst of an evolutionary leap, and it was one of consciousness and capacity to perceive, which I started every workshop I ever did with that phrase from the 70s, early 70s. But what I realized was that people were much, it's like we are an awesome computer. This is very poor analogy, but imagine you're this awesome computer, and you have all this ability, but you've got what's the Miss Mario, or you've got tic-tac-toe on this thing that can tell you about the dimension of the universe, and we've got software on this magnificent entity that we are, mostly held in place and put in place by conditioning when we were open to get programmed, little, young, come in with all the capacity, open, and what we get programmed with is shut down this, shut down that, you can't see this, don't say that, this isn't true, get scared if somebody says this. You get all this stuff about sex, death, money, and power. And everybody gets it. Every culture gets it. So I had to plant seeds that were antidotes and started to make it safe to download better software. And then what I realized, and what I would say every workshop is, I'm going to say things that I hope are really helpful, that they really serve you. I'll say words, things that I believe are true. But I don't think that's the most important part of what happens in a workshop. I think the most important part is that I radiate the experience and you feel it. Because that's the part of us that is most needing to wake up. That we can sense ourselves. We don't have to rely on fear-based conditioning, because we can rely on heart-based feeling that takes us right back to our innocence of our childhood. And from that place, we are able to reprogram our computer to get off tic-tac-toe and Super Mario or whatever it is. We can now play a role that each of us comes into play to contribute to the unfolding of the universe, to contribute our unique selves and creativity into the dynamic living, which is how we actualize and create. You have to live it. But then you get in touch with the software you got, how you can do that, how it's all right there. And so, in a way, I was planting software, and I was radiating a new state of being that is catching, that's inherent in everybody, every single person. Now, where we're all different, and we are all different, is we come in to take on different jobs, different modes, different things to do. And our joy in life comes from actualizing these things. This is what makes us happy. And what makes us sad is when we are believing conditioning that won't let us do that. It's that simple almost. And that's what planting seeds was about, and I remember thinking, don't worry that this is taking time, because it's going to take 20 years at least. I had a whole bunch of visions about 20-year leaps in evolution, and even had a synchronistic thing I read in the paper somewhere, or something about some anthropologist, or I don't know what title yet, but he was trying to say that evolution doesn't happen. It happens slowly to get ready. It takes hundreds, maybe thousands of years to get ready for something. But the evolutionary change, that we become another being, we become actually different, happens in like 20 years. That everything pulls together, and then what start being born are new beings that have more amplified capabilities. And those amplified capabilities are evolved through those thousands of years, and sometimes hundreds of years, by the needs of the environment, by the needs of the physical reality around them. And that's why different cultures and different races have evolved slightly different. We're all Homo sapiens, we're all exactly the same, but we've evolved in different contexts. I mean, one of the most obvious stupidities is racism, because especially based on color, which is one of the most superficial qualities we evolved. And that's because if you live in a very hot climate, you can't have too much clothes on, and you need vitamin D from the sun, but when you're not wearing much clothing because it's so hot, you get burned. So in evolution, we develop melanin, so you filter out the harmful rays of the sun. And really fair people lived in Nordic climes where it was cold, and they always had clothes on, and they didn't get enough sunlight. And so they had to be really white, so the little bit of sun they got in. It's that simple, and it's that foolish to be racist of any sort. And what racism is an ability, a talent, a discernment ability that has been allocated to misinformation. Because we do have discerning abilities about, we get hurt, we eat a piece of fruit, and we feel really good. We go, we're going to look for that one again. We eat a piece of fruit, and we get sick to our stomach and almost die, and we go, we're going to avoid that fruit, because so that fruit takes on a bias against it. I don't know if that's a good example, but we have that built in. And if we misdirect that association to something superficial when we've had a bad experience, or worse, we feel guilty, like slavery created great guilt in the United States.
Or learned.
Huh?
Learned. When it's learned. When it's learned in your environment to be particular because of a person's skin color.
Yeah.
It may not even be based on an experience. It may just be it's based on what other people say, but it's not.
Well, what I'm saying is based on a biological built-in thing to be careful of certain things because of experience in the past.
Okay.
And we blanket associate without discernment because we're frightened, because we're afraid. I don't know if this fits, but I had 2 cats. One was a scaredy cat, and the other was a divine being from another place. And the scaredy cat I got them both, not the pound, but at the front of a
rescue
store, somebody giving away kittens. Poor Luther had an eye infection. He was sickly when I got him, and he was a nervous cat. He was always worried, and he needed to win. He used to play hide and seek with my ex-husband, and if my husband didn't let him win, Luther would get so mad. He'd shake his feet. I mean, you'd see him be angry because it's a classic insecure person who's been damaged right from the beginning. Now, Gabriel, my other cat, was this fluffy little ball of Maine Coon cat that grew to be, as big as a dog. And had golden hair with a white throat and aqua eyes. Absolutely beautiful, totally psychic, a great hunter. Luther, I think, was afraid of the mice. Gabriel was magical. And I remember one simple thing, which made me know how certain things get either imprinted in this lifetime or even handed down through genetic memory. Gabriel, like I say, was a hunter, but he would find garter snakes, but he wouldn't kill them. He'd hold them in his mouth and they'd be wiggling at both ends out of his mouth, and he'd walk around and he'd show it to me. And I'd say, Gabriel, you're not going to let that go. And he'd look at me, and then he'd walk over, let go. And that was that. Luther was afraid of the electric cords from the vacuum cleaner. So all I'm saying is, this is not only mammalian, it's life. Life has a DNA, has a memory, and there is genetic memory, and we're all part of a bigger whole. So getting that bigger picture is tough in a narrow three-dimensional reality of winning and losing and, kill anybody that might hurt you and, just totally simplistic. So that's one thing. It's sort of like